Hello, everybody,
Hey.
and welcome to the White Hatter YouTube News Show. I'm Brandon.
I'm Darren. Guess what I just finished doing?
You just finished the program
I just finished a program. How do you know that?
because you're dressed up.
I'm dressed up. It's one of two that I'm doing today. A little challenging. I kind of tweaked my back this weekend, so a comfort level of 10's the worst. I'm at about a 7 right now. So yeah, I know it's getting old. Getting old, dude. Things to look forward to.
Well, let's talk about recent news stories, shall we?
In the news.
First news topic to share is a bug in Apple Safari can leak your Google information and recent browsing history. This is applicable in both Macs and Apple iOS devices.
So what's the big deal here?
So right now, how it works is basically when you visit websites, there is a database kind of on your computer that is being leaked, which it shouldn't be, to those websites.
Yeah, which is unusual for Apple because they pride themselves on the privacy factor, right?
Yeah, at the time of the article and time of recording this show, Apple has not fixed the issue. I'm sure they are very much aware of it, and I'm sure they will fix it. And this also applies in private browsing. So if you're in private browsing, and let's say you visit 5 websites, and let's say you visit the 6th website, well, the 6th website can potentially now see all the 5 websites you visited. Now, private browsing...
Just the website or my wife?
Websites. And then, but if you're not using private browsing, it can also identify your unique Google ID.
Yeah,
which again is not supposed to
do
happen.
we know whoever did this? Did they notify Apple of this?
Oh, I can't actually recall if they did or not. I'm sure they probably did, but if not, I'm sure Apple is very much aware of this.
I pretty well guarantee you that they'll come out with a fix for that fairly quickly. I would think. So
just a little note for all of you who use Safari. Not saying it's a significantly huge issue, but if you're visiting pages that might not be all that safe or secure, you might want to double check.
One of the things we've been talking about in our high school programs with the teens is maybe getting them to think a little bit differently about the type of browser that they're using to help protect their privacy anyways. I mean, we're recommending things like Firefox as a browser. We're recommending the new Brave as a browser, implementing that instead of using Google search, instead of using, think about using DuckDuckGo or Start Page now is another good one, and then combining it with a VPN. So, and we here at the White Hatter, we use a variety of different browsers depending upon what it is we're doing from an investigator or research standpoint as well. So just things to think about.
Next article, a report suggesting Team USA athletes are being suggested to not take their personal phones to the upcoming Olympics due to potential security fears, just due to international travel and traveling into places that may not have the same privacy values as, say, North American organizations.
Like China?
Or, things like that.
This isn't anything new. I mean, when Summer Olympics were hosted there as well, the same recommendations was made. I would recommend, we're in Canada, I would recommend to the Canadian Olympic coordinators to tell all their athletes, like, don't take your personal phones to China. Get a burn phone, right? Like, just buy one. In fact, my thought is the Canadian Olympic Committee, they should be buying burner phones for all their athletes and saying, here you go. This is what we want you to use when you're in China. And why is that important, Brandon?
I mean, different places around the world have different levels of privacy and security flaws and breaches of privacy and how we would consider a breach of privacy here in North America. And this is just general for this overall international travel.
It is.
I mean, you were talking to earlier about earlier before the show and how, maybe even people traveling into the United States should have burner phones. I do know like some powerful organizations who have CEOs that travel internationally have pretty strict device handling procedures while they travel, especially if they're carrying sensitive information.
There's another social media advocate, safety advocate here in Canada that says that every time they go into the U.S., they never take their personal phones. They always bring a burner phone with them. And, I'm thinking, well, for who you are and what you do, really the risk is low of anything happening. But if you're a high level C type of individual with a corporation where you have corporate information that is sensitive, well then traveling into the United States puts that at risk. So going with a burner phone would be the better way to go for sure. But definitely if you're going to someplace like China, North Korea, Russia, stuff like that, I would recommend that you don't bring your own personal phone, that you get a burner phone.
We talked about this on the news show months and months ago, and how a NASA scientist who was traveling for work had their NASA work device searched at the border, and they were like, why? NASA is American, and that's something that, international travel, those things do happen. But you have to kind of base your risk on whatever.
I mean, another good example is we do some work at schools, boarding schools here in Canada. We have a number of Chinese students from China that are going to school here in Canada. And one of the things I recommend to them is that if they're in Canada and using a phone, when they return back to their country, don't take that phone back with them, because sometimes students here in Canada that are using their phones are going to sites that are prohibited by China, right? So, and then if all of a sudden you're going back home to China and they get your phone, look into your phone, and they see that you've been going to these sites that they prohibit, it places yourself potentially at risk, right? So I even say to Chinese students that are here in Canada, because a lot of them, once they get to Canada, you have so much internet freedom comparatively, to what's going,
true.
Right? So therefore, be very careful, because if you're using your personal device to access the internet here in North America, once you go back to your country, there could be a risk to you as well, right?
Yeah.
So, just little safety things that we
things to consider. Something athletes probably never even used to consider, but now, given political environments that we all live in, something to consider.
Absolutely.
Next article. Android users can now disable 2G in order to block Stingray attacks.
Isn't Stingrays, those are in the ocean? Like, how are they going to attack?
It's not a fish.
I know. So what is
Stingray? Has been kind of one of those trademark terms over the last decade that are devices that allow potential governments or even law enforcement to kind of push and control cell towers, to create a fake cell tower so people connect to it, and where you can collect and intercept data and communications and all that stuff. So Android has come up with some updates on available applicable phones that you can go into the settings and disable 2G connections. And this is important because Stingray primarily relies on 2G vulnerabilities. Things like 4, 5, and whatever 6G we're at right now. I don't know.
5G.
5G right now?
5G.
Okay. It'll be 6G tomorrow.
Yeah, for sure.
The new generations of the G networks have fixed the vulnerabilities, but Stingrays have been designed, you can actually kick phones off of 5G to have them connect to 2G in order to then begin the exploitation. Well, on Android, you can disable 2G altogether, which I'm sure will make it far more difficult for Stingrays to conduct their
This
work.
is only specific to Android phones, though, right?
Yeah, and Apple has not had such feature yet. I'm sure, given their privacy branding, I'm sure they will probably implement this pretty soon.
Stingray was a big deal in the United States when it went public. Snowden was the one kind of brought this to light, right? And then, here in Canada, a number of news agencies started to ask Canadian law enforcement are using Stingray. And some of the bigger ones didn't want to give any kind of comment, right? So I don't know. I can't say
no
for
comment.
sure. I can't say for sure if they were, but something tells me they probably were.
No comments, not a yes, not a no.
Yeah, and that is somewhat concerning to me as a Canadian, right? Like, although I come from a law enforcement background, as you know, I still think intercepting private communications without warrant is not permittable, and we shouldn't be finding ways, or law enforcement, in my opinion, shouldn't be trying to find ways to skirt that. And so if law enforcement was using Stingray with a warrant, totally different.
Yeah, but then you question the validity of the warrant.
But that's up to a judge to decide, right?
Yeah.
An independent judge. At least we have a check and balance there, right?
Yeah, I guess we don't have a FISA court.
No, we don't. But even a FISA court in the United States is becoming somewhat questionable, right? So, and we don't have the Patriot Act here in Canada like they do in the United States, where this thing is used all the time under the Patriot Act. So, from a usage standpoint, I'm not a big supporter of law enforcement using it without warrant. Spy agencies that use it, totally different story, right? Because they're spies.
Yeah,
right?
But then again, them operating in
Canadian jurisdiction, for sure.
soil is kind of a no-no.
Sure.
But as we've seen with leaks of that,
for sure. Like there was a big article that just hit today on put out. It's hitting all the media over the fact of these fusion centers being created across country for major law enforcement, the RCMP, Calgary, Edmonton, Toronto. They got these fusion centers now where they're bringing together all kinds of different technologies for the purposes of crime reduction. And so there's a big light being shined on them right now, saying, hey, are these fusion centers, are they using things like Stingray and other hardware and software technology to intercept private communications without warrant, right? So, and that should be a question that is asked. And law enforcement should be open and honest, in my opinion, about that. People like spy agencies like CSIS, CIA, those kind of people, no, they should stay clandestine in what it is that they're doing.
When operating outside of national boundaries.
Correct, right? So unless the country allows it to take place within the country as well, right? In some countries,
doesn't mean they don't operate illegally.
That we may not know about, right?
As we've seen with various leaks.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So
for sure. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you have Android, that might be an option you may want to consider. Especially if you travel internationally, relating to our last story.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Next article, Google Drive accounted for most malware downloads of cloud storage sites in 2021.
Should that surprise us?
Not really. I mean, Google Drive is free. You can make a limited Google account, so it's not unreasonable. A hacker or scammer will then use Google Drive, upload a virus, send the link to somebody, go, hey, download this report or whatever. You download it and you get a virus. So
it's interesting, right? I shared with you before we started the show, we had a client connect with us who was really concerned about using Google Drive to store pictures because they, anything you're putting into Google Drive, you'd be fooling yourself to think that Google is not scanning it, right? And having a look at it.
They are, yeah.
For all those kind of reasons. And so they were very hesitant about putting pictures of them and their family in Google Drive, and they were looking for another option. And so I connected with you and said, hey, Brandon, what options are out there? And you mentioned?
Sync's a good one.
Yeah,
I mean,
we use Sync, right?
This was a Canadian person, and we suggested Sync has Canadian servers. It's like a Dropbox, but it uses Canadian servers, HIPAA compliant, all that stuff.
Yeah, HIPAA, like in hippopotamus?
Sure.
What do you mean HIPAA?
American health regulations.
Right. It's kind of like PIPEDA here in Canada, right?
Yeah, similar. Yeah, it's compliant to all those.
FOIPA.
Yeah, all compliant. So, but even then, the services like that can still be used to distribute malware.
For sure.
Services like that cost money.
Yeah.
So, unlikely random hackers and scammers will use it.
Right.
Google Drive is free, and people see Google and they trust it.
Yeah.
So,
interesting.
Things to consider when downloading things from random Google links. Next article, which has absolutely nothing to do with online safety and digital literacy.
But it's funny.
I just saw the title, and I just thought I just want to add it and talk about it.
Yeah.
FedEx asked FAA to let it install anti-missile lasers
okay, when you
on
say
its cargo planes.
Okay, when you say that, all I can think about is
which we called a laser.
Lasers. I don't know if you've seen them. Have you seen the movie? I mean, it's perfect, right? Because there's this missile coming up. It looks like a phallic symbol, and they use a laser to shoot it.
Or sharks.
Or sharks, right? Well, like when I read this is the first thing that came to my mind. So what's going on with this one? I know. It's pretty funny.
So basically, it's what the headline says. FedEx has applied to the FAA to allow anti-missile lasers on its cargo planes.
Why?
People are suggesting it's because they want to open up their routes to more potentially volatile airspaces.
Makes sense.
So they may want some defense systems
Makes
so
sense.
their stuff doesn't get shot down. Which, I mean, makes sense. Looking into the article and the relationship here, I think there's more of a business perspective as well. So the FedEx worked with which company? It was
a Defense Department company?
Yeah, it was.
Go figure.
Yeah. Northrop Grumman.
Oh.
And they worked with them for a year, and they tested their missile laser system in 2008 for a year on FedEx cargo planes.
I bet you this technology is already being used on things like Air Force One. And,
yeah. I mean, the technology was developed and ready to go in 2008. They said in 2008, the company that developed it, it's good to go and ready to develop in military purposes. Now, FedEx was used to test it, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's a further business relationship there, where if FedEx can potentially prove a concept of this and make it more of a typical thing that just happens, and maybe there's a business relationship, maybe there's some financial benefit here. If maybe FedEx, I don't know for certain, but I can assume that there was a relationship before.
Well, you know the U.S. military has been using. I mean, there's been lots of disclosures now about their newest warships are now using lasers.
Lasers are
on
cool.
Their ships and that kind of stuff. Lasers are cool.
Lasers are cool.
I guess. I mean, it's pretty funny.
And
right?
I mean, I'm thinking from a national security perspective. You know, hypothetically, let's say there is a missile in the air. Wouldn't it make sense that missile defense systems already in the air would be far more effective than ones on the ground?
That was the whole idea of the Star Wars thing that, from the United States. I mean, they've been, I'm sure you've seen it. They've got a plane now. It looks like a Boeing 737 or whatever.
Yeah, with that dome thing.
With the dome thing on the front, right? And you got to know that they got them on, say, a sub or boats and planes, right? Like lasers.
Oh, you think about it. Like if you have all the planes in the air with anti-missile lasers, it's probably a decent defense system compared to just having silos on the ground.
All I can think of is Tetris, not Tetris, or what was that game with the little
asteroids? No,
no. The game I'm talking about with the little monsters and they're coming down and then boop. Boop.
That was Space Invaders?
Space Invaders. Yeah, Space Invaders.
And then there was the Missile Command.
Yeah.
Missile Command was the one that had the bricks come down.
Yeah.
Yeah, the little cities, yeah.
So anyways.
That's
a funny
I just wanted to share that
good way to end the show.
Just for the,
good way to
the
end
laughs.
The show.
We'll see how that goes. Obviously, if this is successful and FedEx gets this running.
Busy week last week. I think we had 10 presentations last week. This week we got
like
9. Yep. And we've come up with another great idea for another YouTube show. We're getting in with the system that we developed where we're interacting with schools. The teens can interact with us directly from their devices, which is kind of cool. And we're just being inundated with questions and we can't answer all.
Sometimes we can't answer all the questions
right?
in the
and so
Q&A period.
You came up with this great idea. What was the idea you came up with? It was a great idea.
What we're going to try and do is right now once a month, and I have it on the calendar to do a recording, I think next week.
Oh, cool.
Is we're going to go through questions that we didn't get a chance to respond to.
What a great idea.
Top-rated questions we're going to pick from, and we're going to address those student questions here in a YouTube Q&A format.
What amazes me is the maturity level of the questions that we're getting from students, both in middle schools and high schools, right? It's unbelievable, which tells us they're paying attention to what it is that we're saying. And they're thinking critically about this stuff and asking some great questions. So rather than, we try to answer as many as we can when we're doing the live presentations. But I think this session that we're going to do, I think is going to be really cool. I think teens are going to love it. I think adults are going to love it because the adults are going to be able to see these questions and learn at the same time. Kind of cool.
Yep. So I think I have a scheduled recording for next week when we have some free time between programs.
Sounds good.
All right.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
So look forward to that special YouTube video coming out pretty soon.
Yeah.
And that's what we have here today.
So on behalf of myself, I'm Darren.
And Brandon, thank you all so much. And we'll see you all next time.
See ya.
Bye.